moving to item 7, Maori seats for Auckland Council consultation feedback and next steps. Now, whilst Libby Orr and Rose Leonard coming to the chair, to the table, I'm going to put a chair's recommendation that there needs to be more work done on the bigger issue than just wards in isolation. And I think our joint governance working party led by Councillor Ferry is the right place to explore that. This item is something that's kicked off in previous political terms with an agreement in principle in 2017 to establish a Maori ward. A lot has happened since then, including changes in government. And so I'm going to move, and I have a second, Councillor Leone, we agree that further work is required to determine the appropriate arrangements for Maori representation in Auckland Council, including in discussion with Maori and the Auckland public, and request that this be considered by the Joint Governance Working Party and reported back to the governing body by 31st of December 2024. Now that's been tabled and first and seconded. I would like you to, Rose and Libby, to address us with what they've got so far, and then we'll have questions, and then we will have a debate, at which stage something else might happen, but we'll have your presentation, then we will have questions, not speeches, then we will have a debate, which will offer the sorts of things that you just calm yourself until
that's right. I'm always calm, Your Worship. So, look, I just wanted to clarify one thing, Your Worship. At what stage, because I've indicated that I have an amendment.
Yes.
But I mean, at what stage will that be, the first off the block?
After questions. After questions, then we'll go to debate, and that's the period in which things can happen. Okay. You right with that?
Yeah, it's been tabled. I just wanted to.
No. I'm not quietening anybody down. Just in the fullness of time. So please address us, Rose and Libby. Thank you. And outline Luann Ballantyne. My humble apologies, Luann Ballantyne. Who could forget you?
Kia ora, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the introduction. Tēnā koutou katoa, councillors. We've got a big decision to make today. I just wanted to introduce myself, Rose Leonard. Most of you know me. Libby Orr has been the SME for this work, but I did just want to note that Luann's team, Ngā Matarai, have been a huge part of this work as we've been engaging with Aucklanders. So I'll just hand over to Libby now. Thanks.
Kia ora koutou. I just have a short presentation just to pull out the key points from the report. Okay, so just quickly, we'll first address the purpose of the report, and then we'll look at some context, both background and statutory, before looking at the consultation overview, some feedback, and leading us to the next steps and some options for your consideration today. So the purpose of the report is really to present feedback from Māori, the wider public, and local boards on Māori seats for Auckland Council, and to decide whether to introduce Māori seats for the 2025 local elections. So taking things back a few steps quickly, these are just the key decisions made by governing body in the lead up to today. We've got the 2017 agreement in principle for supporting Māori wards subject to the removal of the set number of councillors, and as we'll speak to shortly, that change has now been made. In 2021, governing body agreed to undertake preliminary engagement with mana whenua and mātā waka, and that led us to 2023 agreeing to seek the views of Māori and the wider public. So just looking at what we have heard already, 2022 engagement with Māori, staff met with a total of 18 mana whenua and 7 mātā waka representatives across April to August in 2022. We received 6 pieces of feedback, and really what we heard, this is a very high level overview of what we heard. It has already been previously reported to the governing body and joint governing body IMSB meetings, so this is very high level. But what we heard really was that neither the parliamentary model nor the Royal Commission model were suitable for Tāmaki. The Royal Commission model did receive slightly stronger support for its inclusion of an appointed mana whenua seat, but one thing that was unanimous in their feedback was that the status quo, understood to be no dedicated Māori representation, was no longer an option. So just looking at the models, a quick refresher, if you will. The parliamentary model is what is currently available to Auckland Council under legislation, and it uses a formula in the Local Electoral Act, and for Auckland that would result in 1 or 2 elected seats. The Royal Commission model, developed through the Royal Commission on Auckland Governance in 2009, and proposed 3 safeguarded seats, 2 to be elected and 1 appointed. And then we have any other model, which would be a bespoke model of Māori representation for Auckland, and that may or may not require legislative change. So an update on the Local Government Electoral Legislation Act 2023. This received royal assent on 30th of August, and there are really 2 critical changes. Removed the set number of 20 councillors for Auckland Council. This is something that Auckland Council has been advocating for since 2015. And then the second change being requirements for councils to consider Māori representation, just noting there that that is consider and not requiring to implement. And within the requirements for consideration, there's a 2-step process. So first to consider Māori representation, including public consultation, and then to make the detailed decisions through a representation review. And just noting there that Auckland Council's next required representation review after the 2024 one, which we'll speak to shortly, will be in 2031. And at that point, if Auckland Council has not had Māori representation for 2 elections, it must consider it again. If it has established Māori representation, it may choose to reconsider it at that stage. So just looking now to the Rep Review 2024, this will be informed by a decision today on Māori wards, and this decision must be made by the 23rd of November this year. The development of Rep Review options has been delegated to the Joint Governance Working Party, who will report initial options for your consideration in December. So now, just moving on to the consultation itself, we've got some key points up there. The consultation ran from the 21st of August to the 24th of September, and as it is acknowledged in the report, it's clear that Māori are interested in, affected by and directly impacted by this decision. So consultation consisted of a Māori engagement stream in addition to a wider public engagement stream. Across those 2 streams, the activities are listed there. I won't run through them, but consultation did draw a total of 11,885 submissions. Now, just looking at a really high-level overview of the feedback that we heard. So down the left-hand side there is question 1. Do you think Auckland Council should introduce Māori seats for the 2025 local elections? And question 2, if Auckland Council decides to introduce Māori seats, which model do you prefer? So from Māori, generally, we heard a general support, and in terms of preferred models, the individual feedback was quite split on which model, and where the Māori entity feedback was strongly in favour of the Royal Commission model. And sorry, just to remind, the options that were provided were the parliamentary model, Royal Commission model, any other model, and no preference. And so from the wider public, feedback was generally opposed, and those that did provide feedback on question 2 largely either cited a different model or no preference. And then from local boards, feedback was very supportive, and the parliamentary model received the most support, but it is worth noting that the local boards did encourage the governing body to listen to the feedback from Māori on this matter. Now, looking at the key themes, I won't read through this in its entirety. It's in the report on page 13, but as noted in attachment B, the feedback summary from the wider public it does not amount to a referendum. So it's not just about the numbers. here we see in this table that there are two overarching themes of equality or equity and democracy. And there's those that support and oppose it that fall into one of those two themes. As I say, there is more detail on this in the report. Now, we looked at question 1 and question 2 earlier, and question 3 asked for any other feedback that submitters would like the governing body to consider when making this decision. Now, while the IMSB was not included directly in a question, it was referenced in the consultation material as it is a part of the governance model for Auckland. And those that did provide feedback on the IMSB, 2.9% of all submissions mentioned the IMSB, and these submissions generally fell into one of the two themes of Māori are already adequately represented, or would support Māori seats if the IMSB is dissolved or reduced. So that really brings us to the next steps and the options for consideration, and there are quite a few options in front of you today. I'll just quickly run through those. Recommendations B and F provide a straightforward yes and no respectively. Recommendation C provides a pathway for the Royal Commission model in a two-stage process, that being the first stage of introducing elected seats at this point and seeking legislative change for the appointed seat. And then recommendation D provides for staff to report back on legislative change towards the Royal Commission model without putting in elected seats at this time. And recommendation E acknowledges that none of these fit and provides for staff to report back on the process for developing a bespoke model. So looking at the next steps here, this will be really dependent on, oh sorry, the clicker's not working. Oh, there you go. This will be really dependent on the decision of governing body today. But as with any other consultation, staff will close the loop and update the Have Your Say webpage, and of course move into the 2024 REC review. And just again noting that the Joint Governance Working Party will report initial options to governing body in December. So thank you. I'll just, Rose, has got anything else?
Nothing to add, Your Worship. Carry on.
Okay, do we have any questions? I just want to remind people that please don't bring the staff into the debate. If it's a question, just please ask it as a question, not a statement where the staff have to figure out what you're asking them. So it's questions now. There will be time for debate, but we'll have questions. Thank you. Councillor Ferry, Councillor Leone and Councillor Fuli. Okay? I'm
Thanks.
Councillor Filipaina.
Thanks, Chair. So my question was just around the date of the 23rd of November, that the slide said we have to make the decision by. Can I just get some clarification on that? Because obviously that has a bearing on the Chair's recommendation. So what's the basis for that 23rd November date for a decision? Yeah, and I might have a follow-up.
So the 23rd of November is the date that's currently in the Local Electoral Act, by which we have to make a decision on elected Māori wards, whether to introduce them or not. The changes through the Local Government Electoral Legislation Act changes that date into the 20th of December, but that doesn't come into force until after the next election. So currently, as it stands, under existing legislation, if Auckland Council does decide to introduce Māori wards, elected seats, that decision must be made by no later than the 23rd of November.
Okay, so the new provisions, sorry, I just want to fully understand this. So the new provisions don't take effect until really 2028. Mm-hmm. So the current provisions therefore apply, and that requires that 23rd November date. How does that line up with the fact that we're able to put in a reorganisation proposal and have to finish the representation review not until September 2024? Seems odd to me that we could potentially add general seats or subtract significant numbers of them and make some really big changes, change the local boards. We don't have to decide that until September next year, but we have to do this one by the 23rd of November this year. What? Sorry, I'm not trying to make a political point. I'm genuinely confused.
That's correct. It's considered like a two-stage process. We make a decision whether or not to have Māori seats today or before the 23rd. Then we go on to our rep review and decide how many councillors, whereby we will know how many seats. If you decide yes today, then we would decide how many councillors there would be, and part of that decision would be how many Māori seats would there be, up to a total of 2 using the parliamentary formula.
Okay, so the chair's recommendation then requires us to say yes today. Or it doesn't, we can't have them until 2028.
That's correct, 2028.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Leone, please, question? No, it's been answered. Councillor Fuli, please.
Thank you. I guess my questions have largely been asked by Councillor Ferry, but just for extra clarity, if we vote today to support the amendment that's been put up, or the recommendation that's been put up, it would mean that we'd be effectively saying that we do not, or we will not have Māori wards in time for the 2025 election.
That's correct. That's how the resolution is written at the moment, because it's asking staff to report back in December of next year. So we could not do that in time for 2025 if that date stayed. However, if you so direct us, we could, very difficult, but we could do something for 2025 if you ask the Joint Governance Working Party to report back before the 23rd of November this year. But I would suggest that would just be asking them to come back to you with a recommendation for which you must make a decision yourselves again on the 23rd of
Before
November.
the 23rd of November.
So at your next governing body meeting.
Okay. So if the current recommendation passes, then we won't be able to revisit whether or not to have Māori seats again until 2020, after the next election.
That's correct.
Kia ora. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Hopana, question, please.
Thank you, Chair. Can I confirm that 18 of the 21 local boards supported Māori representation?
That's correct.
And were the 18 of the 21 or looking at the parliamentary model?
No, not necessarily. It's difficult to summarise the feedback in that short little sentence, but there was support for the parliamentary model as well as support for the Royal Commission model eventually, as well as considering the views of Māori in this matter.
Would I be correct in saying that 52% of the 18 that supported Māori representation supported the parliamentary seats?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, that is. Also, if we look at it, that there have been decisions made from the previous councils that Māori, that the governing body at the time supported Māori representation or Māori ward pending legislative change.
That's correct, in 2017.
Yeah, 2017. I also recall in 2019 that was the case as well, but that may not have been with the governing body, but 2019 it was supported by the members that Māori seats be established. Can you confirm that legislative change has been made in regards to not only the numbers that we have, which was the important thing that the governing body approved in principle to establish, was the change of the numbers on the governing body?
Yes, that's correct. So the set number of councillors for Auckland Council has now been removed, and in line with all other councils in New Zealand, Auckland Council can now determine any number between 5 and 29 councillors.
Your Worship, I've got two more. One more is, if this, the Chair's recommendation gets lost, I have tabled in a recommendation that a Māori ward be established for 2025. Is that the only recommendation for us to get Māori wards for the 2025 elections?
Yes, it is what is possible and available to us under existing legislation.
Last one, the Chair's recommendation will not make that possible.
Not for 2025,
Thank
as,
you.
as it is currently written.
Thank you. Yeah, as previously indicated, Chair, I've got the recommendation of this loses.
Fair enough. The good question, good answer. Deputy Mayor Simpson, I've got another 5 after that.
Thanks, Your Worship. We, out of all the iwi in Auckland, did every iwi submit on this?
No.
So how many actually did submit and how many didn't?
We have 3 iwi submit on this.
And can you also tell me, as far as being on the Māori roll, i.e. one person, one vote, you don't have to be Māori to be on the Māori roll. Is that correct?
You do not have to prove you are Māori to be on the Māori roll.
Right, thank you.
Okay, those questions have been answered. Councillor Hills, you have questions?
Kia ora, thank you, Mayor. I just follow up to Deputy Mayor's question first. You do sign a declaration saying you are Māori though, right? That's a legal obligation that you can be fined under.
I believe that is correct, but there is no check. If you
Yeah,
like.
there is no check, but you are asked if you are Māori. The question I have, because we do get a lot of, one of the common threads is the one person, one vote through the Hobson's Pledge emails. Could you just update us on how that would work? So obviously some wards, putting aside that the North Shore ward, the voters in the ward I represent actually get one person, 2 votes because there's 2 councillors, and say Councillor Simpson's ward is one person, 1 vote because there's 1 councillor in that ward. Put that aside, what is the difference if you're on the Māori roll or the general roll? How many votes? Is it still 1 person, 1 vote?
I might have to bring Warwick to the table, but I'll have a go. In any election, every person has 1 vote for the mayor, 1 vote for their ward councillor, and votes for their local board members. If you are on the residential roll, a lot of people have been talking about this, you may also have a further vote if you're voting for local boards and your other house is in a different local board, you may have different separate votes for that additional property for that local board, but you do not have an additional vote for the ward councillor, nor do you have an additional vote for the mayor. So that in that way there is already provision for additional votes, but to your question, if you're on the Māori roll, you have the same voting rights as every other Aucklander, 1 vote.
Right. So essentially what you're saying is that person would transfer from, say, the North Shore ward to the Māori ward. They will no longer have the 2 votes for the North Shore councillors. They would now vote for the candidates on the Māori ward. So their voting power stays.
Exactly the same. That is a common misconception. So thank you for raising that.
And I think the Māori seats have been in existence since 1868. Are you saying that the way it would be done is exactly under the parliamentary model, which is the only legal process, that would be the same as what happens in government? You will be able to choose to come on and come off within a certain period. You will only be able to vote on whatever role you have chosen to sit on.
That's correct, and I think the time frame is up to 3 months before a general election or up to 3 months before a local election. People can swap roles.
Thank you. Good question, good answer. Councillor Henderson, please, your question.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just a question in relation to the Chair's recommendations, and quoting here, including in discussion with Māori and the Auckland public. In your opinion, would that bind us to an entire another consultation process?
We have considered that, and I cannot answer that unequivocally at this moment, but in all likelihood, if we're looking at 2028, seats for 2028, I would suggest that we would need to have a fresh look at this with Aucklanders. But I cannot unequivocally say that right now. We're just doing some work on whether we would actually have to consult again.
Thank you.
It's quite possible if the joint working party have any changes, we'll have to consult anyway. So consultation is there to button around us everywhere. Councillor Darby, please, your question.
Thanks, Rose. Just going back to that one person, one vote. So the ratepayer role allows multiple votes, right? And if I had 20 properties in 20 different, or 21 in different local board areas, I could exercise 21 votes on the ratepayer role.
I want to just check with Matua Warwick on that.
Look, it's probably
Okay.
not critical to this argument, to be honest, but the one person, one vote argument is an interesting one.
There's
Warren,
an answer coming
you
here.
have
I think
appeared,
you'll
Warren.
find that you might get 21, but not for the mayor or for the councillor. Is that correct?
I'm referring to the local board vote.
Your Worship, just reading directly from the Local Electoral Act, no person is entitled to vote more than once at the same electional poll. And so elections for different local boards are considered to be different elections. If you are a resident in one local board area and you have property in another local board area, you can vote in both. But in terms of the election for the members of the governing body, that's one election. You only get one vote.
So you could vote for the local board member in 2 areas, but you can only get one vote for a councillor or a mayor. Is that quite correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, have you got that? Councillor Darby, does that answer your question?
Yeah, we'll move on. So, Rose, just in terms of your report writing, I've read a lot of your reports from your team. I've never found them to be deficient. And you follow a really good process. This has been a long process. We've undertaken consultation with our communities on this. Are there, in your eyes, any gaps in this report or gaps in the process that might, in your team's view, your own view, trigger a requirement to undertake further work on this, which currently is unspecified in the amendment?
I don't believe there's any deficiency in the process that we undertook. I stand by that. But look, our reports there's always room for improvement. As to the Mayor's recommendation, I'd rather not be drawn on that.
That's fine.
That's fine, yeah.
Mayor, probably if I can ask you a question, it's not normal that you ask, but as the mover, so what, sorry, the words, maybe they could be popped up. What is the further work? What are the gaps, the failings in the reporting and process to date?
I think the further work is determining the actual number of councillors, because that has an impact upon the number of Maori seats. So that's the further work. If, for instance, we had increased our numbers, and I'm doing this from memory, to 22, we could have 2 Maori wards. If we reduce it, we could have, or stay where we are, to a certain number, we could have 1. If we go below 7, we can't have any. So, not that I was intending to go below 7, I have no idea what numbers might come out of this. But the further work is about involving the size of the council itself. In addition, the Joint Working Party is considering the number and size of the local boards as well. So all that is work there that hasn't been finished, and it does have an impact upon what sort of Maori seats. So that was the further work, which is my understanding is still as yet undone. But the work so far, as you say, is not deficient in any way.
So I'm just sort of quizzing you politely on we've had a number of supporting workshops to help our decision making here today, and how is it that we've arrived here today and finding ourselves deficient in the process in your eyes? So have you, I don't recall you sort of asking staff to work towards this outcome in the final report. So how come this was not resolved in the supporting workshops to inform our decision making today?
I'll probably answer, and as soon as we go to debate, I'll just have a little statement to kick that off, which may well answer that. But basically, in receiving the responses from the public, it's not a clear mandate. There are groups for and groups against. Even the Maori weren't 100% behind one or the other. And so we have done the consultation, and it produced a mixed result depending on what you're looking for. And so on top of that, the models offered to us are the same for every council around the country, and we have 19 different iwi plus matawaka plus an IMSB, and others don't have any of those things. And so, and there is groups of Maori were interested in two different sorts, one we can do and one we can't do. So it did show there wasn't a completely thing. On top of that, we just had an election where the parties that are going to tell us what to do have indicated difficulties with what we were considering. So I was, it was a way of solving a thorny issue. It's not.
One last question back to Rose. Rose, shared governance responsibility is enshrined in a number of treaty settlements that have been legislated over the particularly the last 30 years. There's shared governance on planning committees up and down the country, from Hawke's Bay across to Taurāwhiti, and then Taranaki, many other places. From your position, looking at where shared governance has been in existence for some time, are there any, real flare issues that have popped up that you would want to be telling us about? I mean, in sense of the success or otherwise of shared governance responsibility on the many entities, from rivers to Maunga to regional planning committees that I'm familiar with, and there must be at least probably 40, if not more. Have there been, can you tell us, are there any issues that we should be mindful of?
Councillor, if I may just kind of confine the question a little bit more down. We have done a little bit of anecdotal research about councils who have already introduced Māori seats, Māori wards. And actually, Libby can just quickly run you through that, if you like, but anecdotally, we do not believe there have been problems with Māori seats that have been introduced already around the motu. Libby.
Thanks, Rose. Yeah, so generally the experiences from the research that we have undertaken has been largely neutral or positive. There's been nothing that we have come across that has been particularly alarming or contentious. The most significant benefits have been noted to be increased representation of Māori issues and voices, contribution of Māori lens to all council decisions, unique perspective and insights that lead to better outcomes for the whole community. we can make a copy of this available to you all after this as well.
Thank you for that. Councillor Dalton, please.
My questions have been asked. Thank you. My questions have been asked.
Thank you for that. Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for your report, and the presentation of it was excellent. My interest is in the assumptions that you have given us around the way in which we can move in order that decisions could be taken for the 2025 elections. Can you confirm that that's based on current legislation?
Thank you, Councillor. The recommendations that we've put in front of you offer a range of options based on the feedback that we have, and keeping faith with that feedback. Some of the recommendations are possible under existing legislation. Some require further work to be done, a local bill to change legislation. The Royal Commission model requires changes to legislation.
So, my question then is, are we looking at any other changes to central government, of which we don't yet know, we won't know for some time? Are we seeking any other changes to aspects of the Auckland legislation at this time?
With respect to voting and electoral...
No, I'm talking about generally about the Auckland legislation. Are we actively pursuing any other changes?
If I might, we are looking at other legislative changes. Some are in relation to Auckland local government legislation. Some are ancillary bits of legislation, such as funding arrangements for the museum and so forth. There are a range of things that are being looked at.
So, in the event that there was an appetite by an incoming government to look at legislative changes to deal with areas of dissatisfaction or dysfunction within the Auckland wider legislation, and that legislation was to be put forward, could that potentially include some changes that may be implemented before 2025? Because I understand that in terms of precedent, if there's new legislation, that's the legislation that we would be working to.
Through the Chair, it depends on what kinds of changes you are talking about, but if you're talking about Māori seats, then we have to make that decision before 23rd of November, as I've said. But if it's other legislative change, I'd have to understand what change you were looking at before I could comment.
I guess there are some who feel that the current Auckland legislation model that we are working to, which was Rodney Hyde was the author rather than the Royal Commission, there are aspects, whether it's local boards, issues that are wider than just the issue of Māori seats, that may be actively pursued with an incoming government. So in the event that there was an appetite for fresh legislation to actually address some of the deficiencies within the current Auckland legislation, my question would be, would that take precedence in order that then the 2025 timetable that you've outlined very specifically today could be fulfilled?
Again, Councillor, I'd really have to understand what changes you were talking about. What we can do before 2025 is change the number of councillors, change the names of local boards, the number of local boards, the number of local board members. Those are all things that are possible to do under existing legislation. but would depend on what else you were talking about before I could comment on whether we could get that done before 2025. But I would suggest that it's a considerable amount of effort to get things changed, to get local wills through. So we would have to put some considerable work into understanding what it is that you're looking for before I could comment.
Then just confirm to me, if new legislation were introduced, that would take precedent under the existing legislation.
Any legislation that was passed that had royal assent takes effect at the time that that legislation states that it will take effect.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Newman has a question. And then I have Councillors Walker, Williamson, Leone and Henderson.
Oh, look, it's actually a relatively minor point, but Warwick, just in terms of, because I think it's a little bit of a rabbit hole, but we're going down this whole issue of the ratepayer electoral provisions in relation to extra votes. But just to confirm that a ratepayer elector is somebody who will have to be nominated to be on the ratepayer roll by the person who is the ratepayer. So I might have rental properties, but I'm not going to have a fistful of ballots. I will have one ballot paper for myself, and I wish to assign the ratepayer vote to a non-parliamentary elector in my community, then I can do so, and it will be someone from outside of Auckland whom I nominate. Section 24.
Your Worship, I might need to get back on that. That's quite a technical question. There are circumstances in which the ratepayer is not a single person. But, for example, if property is held in trust, I believe, or something like that, then you can they can nominate who has the vote. The point is, and the question that was asked before, is whether one person has multiple votes, and the answer to that is that for any election there is only one vote. Yes.
Thank you for clarifying that. Councillor Williamson, please.
Yeah, I guess I'd like to direct a few questions to Warwick. The Maori electoral option used to be that you could only change to the Maori electorate roll or back to the general every 5 or 6 years. As of the 31st of March, Parliament's changed that, and you can now change when you wish, except for 3 months out from a general, 3 months out from a local. Does that mean that you could swap to the Maori electoral roll for the coming local body election, switch back to the general roll for the then general election the next, switch back to the Maori roll for the next local body election?
That's correct, Your Worship.
Sorry?
That's correct.
Yeah. Can I then ask about its Maori ancestry that qualifies you to do so? Because that's what it says on the electoral option, you have to be of Maori ancestry. And yet, I don't know how that is determined. We've just had a bit of a hiccup in our place because we've got the saliva test back from Ancestry.com and we found we do have some ancestry. I don't know where it lies in the family tree. So how does that mean I can vote or not? But more importantly, I was told before you have to sign a statutory declaration. If I signed a statutory declaration thinking I did have Maori ancestry, how are you going to prove I don't? And has there ever been a case taken against someone claiming to have Maori ancestry and then taken to court because they didn't?
Your Worship, in a way that's a little bit out of scope, because the council doesn't maintain the electoral roll. It's the electoral commission that does that, and I don't feel competent really to answer.
We're going to be voting on something which says people can vote on a Maori roll, and yet I don't know how they get on there.
Through the chair, I would suggest to you still only have one vote, and if you wish to vote as a Māori, then you may.
Okay, so it's only if you wish. Because you said before there was a statutory declaration. I've had a quick check and I cannot see that. But even if you did sign a statutory declaration saying you thought you had Maori ancestry, how would anybody ever prove you did not? And is there been any case ever taken against someone for making a false claim to that role?
We can't answer that question today.
I know the answer, but I was just checking with you.
And the answer is no.
The public just refrain from that. Thank you for that question, and thank you for knowing the answer. You get a chocolate fish.
You should have told us the answer.
Councillor Leone, please. Please ask questions which you don't know the answer for. It's more interesting.
Kia ora. Just coming back to the Joint Governance Working Group and the option that's been put up there. Around the Independent Māori Statutory Board, we don't have a member currently on the Joint Governance Working Group. So I would like to know if we could actually look at having a member of the Independent Māori Statutory Board on there, given that we've done that for other committees.
It's my understanding that you can co-opt anybody at any time, but you could also add, through a change of the terms of reference, an independent Māori statutory board member to the Joint Governance Working Party.
Thank you.
I've got no problem with that. Okay, Councillor Henderson.
Thanks for letting me go again, Mr Mayor. Yeah, look, I know we automatically have to look at ward boundaries. I think it's every second term, it's 5 years or 6 years or something like that. 6 years, thanks, Councillor Foley. How often would this issue come back to us for Māori wards? Does that come back automatically as well, or do we have to vote that through?
Your Worship, as was mentioned before, the legislation is changing, so after 2025, whenever we do a representation review after that, if we have not had Māori representation for the 2 previous elections, then we're required to consider it again.
So voting through the substantive, we would have to look at it again anyway automatically, either way, whether we pass this or not.
At some time in the future. Perhaps just a comment on the implications of the amendment. We're currently undertaking a representation review. We're required to conduct a representation review every 6 years. We would not normally, having done it this time for 2025, we wouldn't normally be looking to do it again for 2028, but we would need to if we were going to be instituting Māori representation for 2028.
And just so that I'm clear, that proposed 2028 date, would that involve an entire full representation review? It would, right?
It requires everything that's a requirement under the Electoral Act when you conduct a representation review. It means you look at everything. You could say, look at the local boards and say, we'll just keep them as they are, we won't spend any time on it, but you do actually need to make a proposal for the next election.
Okay, that appears to bring to a close the questions. At this stage, the staff will leave that, and I'm going to have a 5-minute break for those of us who just need to relieve the tension, and we'll start again on the debate in 5 minutes' time, please. Thank you, sir.